Transpersonal Imagination, Turning Psyche Inside Out, is a workshop that will free you from the limitations of the idea that imagination is somehow inside us, the idea of an inner imagination. Because while image work is certainly valued in therapy and applied across many different orientations, not many places address the question of what is imagination, and they work on this assumption that it's an inner faculty. Which is a pity, because when you get into considering actually what is the experience of imagining, it's not actually something inside us. It's not separate from sense experience. It's not just images in the mind, as opposed to a sort of objective reality. Imagination arises between self and world, as is happening right now. The pixels on this screen, the sounds from the loudspeaker, your imagination takes all that and cooks it up in a synthesis to create a story, which is a three-dimensional place with time passing by and me, a person, hopefully not a flat two-dimensional static machine. And that's happening all the time. So how the client sees you, for example, in the transference, so despite all the effort that you're putting into empathizing with the client, showing you care and understanding, if the client's trapped in a fantasy story, they will be imagining you habitually as critical, judgmental, bored, despite all your best intentions to be the opposite. It's kind of like they're trapped in what we're going to call an imaginal identification, a narrow story of who they are and what to expect from the world. And we will on the workshop be exploring how to help people notice those stories, but also importantly to cultivate the imaginal perception needed to then step into an expanded story which draws upon their fuller potential and the possibilities in the world. The possibility that you might give a damn about them in the transference, for example. And of course that will spill over into their other relationships. And secondly, we'll be looking at the idea of an imaginal self. So if imagination arises between self and world, imagination is what joins us up to the world. It's like a bridge, but we're always on the bridge. We don't actually experience the world from a centre, a subjective centre, and neither are we in the world. We're in between all the time. Psychological life happens in our relationships, in the connections we have to the surrounding people and places and things in our life. Problem is that relationships are quite hard to talk about. It's much easier to talk about what Peter feels about Mary rather than the in-between liminal, imaginal process happening between them. But that's what we're going to get into through the idea of an imaginal self. And that will be within the context of a transpersonal imagination. So trans meaning beyond, but also across and through. So transpersonal brings the idea that instead of psychological life being interior and personal and subjective, psychological life is more like a field, a surrounding environment, an encompassing context through which we pass. And we're always imagining this life. So images are reality, imagination is reality, and if we work with images, that's a very potent way into releasing people from the suffering that comes from these narrow, restrictive, alienating, disembodying stories. So do come along to the online events workshop, Transpersonal Imagination. You can catch it live, and then you get to ask me all your questions and maybe try out some things in the role plays or examples. Or you can catch up afterwards in the recording. Okay, so maybe see you. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.